How to Take Interesting Photographs by Cody Allred. Just because you don't have a professional camera does not mean you can't take professional quality photos. Understanding the basics and how to take a good photograph can help immensely in improving your quality of photograph. All you'll need for this project is a working camera. This can be either a professional or a phone camera, and I will show you 5 different simple techniques that any beginning photographer can learn. In this slidecast, I've included all of my own works to show you how I use each of the techniques I'll show you for my own photos. I hope that by following all these techniques, you can take your photography, whether for family, social media, friends, or more, to the next level. The first step in taking a good photograph is learning the basics of your camera. Understanding how your settings work together to create an image is incredibly important. On any camera, as well as most phone cameras, they include a list of settings that you can use for images. These include portrait, child, sport, macro, and more. For most photographs, I recommend using auto. This is because the camera will help you choose the best settings, lighting, and focus for the photo. The one exception to this rule would be sports mode. If you're taking a photo of sports, you want your camera to be taking photos quickly to minimize blur. Now that you have your camera ready, there are many different ways to take an interesting image. These techniques all revolve around the photographer's positioning from their subject. One of my favorite parts of being a photographer is getting into weird and crazy positions for a photo and seeing how it can create a truly unique image. The first technique I'm going to show you is ground view or low angle photography. I would recommend this position for macro shots of flowers, animals sitting in the grass, even landscape views. This allows for the photographer to get an eye level with the subject and creates a truly emotional image. However, you do not want to take portraits using this setting unless you'll be on eye level with your subject. Taking photos of people standing in this technique can make people look larger than they actually are. In my first image that I took, you can see that I took a photo of the iconic Hello Walk here on campus. To take this shot, instead of taking a straight-on shot, I got on the ground and took an upward shot of the trees. This creates a much more interesting image that leads the eye up to the trees and to the point of interest. The next image is of a dog, and I got an eye level in this photograph because it creates much more emotion than if I took the shot above the animal. It really gets right to the face of the animal. In the last image, I laid on the grass to get a wide-angle view of the beauty of this serene and beautiful landscape shot, and this, with a wide-angle lens, really creates a beautiful image. Another technique is getting above your subject. This is called aerial view or high-angle photography. For this technique, I would highly recommend taking photos of people and portraits. This type of photo gives a feeling of empowerment and can create much more interest than a straight-on shot could. Taking photos of food is also recommended with this shot, as it gives a wide-angle view of everything on the plate. In the first image, I used a high-angle shot to shoot all of my favorite things about winter. Using this shot just better shows all the items. Again, you can use this shot for food, as I did in this image, and it shows everything on the plate, and it really creates a feeling as if the person's there eating the food. Finally, even taking a photo of some boots in the fall leaves creates much more interest using this shot than any other type of shot could. Framing is the technique where the photographer uses elements from a scene to frame their photograph. This draws the viewer's eye into an area of focus. I personally love this type of photography, and some of my favorite shots are taken with this technique. I think it's so interesting how you can take parts of nature and the area you're in to create interest in your image. You can see this technique in an image of a bride looking at herself in the mirror. In this case, the frame is the mirror, and it makes that shot so much more unique, and it really creates a much more emotional image of the bride looking at herself on her wedding day. Next, you can see I used a window as a frame for the shot of the beach. It takes the viewer to the place and makes them feel as almost if they're the ones looking out the window. Finally, the frame in this last photograph is architecture, and it really draws the viewer to the bride and groom. One technique that is particularly important to understand is the rule of thirds. This technique is probably the most important technique that a photographer can learn. If you don't want to use any of the previous techniques, this technique is a surefire way to create an interesting image and is essential for all photographers. This rule works by creating a grid like the one below and placing the most important part of a photograph, whether subject, animal, etc., to the middle line, to the far left or right of your image. It can be applied to any subject to improve the composition and balance of your image. As you can see in this image, and the rest, I used the rule of thirds to make a much more interesting shot, and it helped to balance the image out with the person on either the far left or right of the image. The final step to making a photo more interesting is to simply start thinking about your photography more artistically. And I know, it's easier said than done, and it really is, but it happens over time. All it takes is using these techniques, and then eventually you'll start creating some of your own to make a much more interesting image. Anyone can take photos, but being able to look at a photograph and think of different ways you can make it more interesting is bound to make your images look more professional and more beautiful than ever. I hope that you can combine all the techniques you learned today to make your own images, whether for social media, family, or more interesting. Thank you for listening.